Good afternoon, and welcome to Public Speaking in Your Career. My name is Stacey Albanese, Associate Director of Annual Giving and Alumni Engagement. On behalf of our office, we are pleased to partner with the Center for Career Services to bring both students and alumni webinars and programs such as this. For more information on programming such as this or other alumni benefits, I invite you to visit montclair.edu/alumni or contact us at 973-655-4141 or alumni@montclair.edu. In addition to my role as Associate Director, I'm also an adjunct professor of Fundamentals of Speech, a required public speaking class here at Montclair State, and I am presenting today alongside Adam Mayer, Director of Career Development for the Center for Career Services. Take it away, Adam.
Thank you, Stacey. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Public Speaking and Your Career. My name is Adam Mayer, and I'm the Director of Career Development in the Center for Career Services here at Montclair State University. Today we'll cover public speaking do's and don'ts, tips on presenting, and the elements behind public speaking which can increase your professional visibility, giving you the forum to drive your message home. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them into the questions pane. You can send your questions in at any time during the presentation, and we'll address them as time permits. So let's begin. So some of you might recognize this font. This is certainly drawn from Stranger Things, and we put it in there because public speaking and Stranger Things, not that they're terribly related, but some of them do relate in that they can be kind of scary. So I'm wondering if some of you who are attending have felt when providing a speaking engagement in front of people, or whether big group or small group, whether or not it was actually scary. And I wondered too, I don't wonder about myself, but I have had times where I've done public speaking. It was kind of scary. What are your thoughts, Stacey? Have you ever sort of gotten up there and done some speaking and it wasn't entirely comfortable?
Yes, absolutely. Even though, I teach it and I fancy myself pretty good at it, there's still times that I get butterflies, get nerves, a little anxiety. I spoke at an event here on campus in the spring, and I got on stage and the lights were directly in my eyes. And I honestly don't remember how it went, but I remained calm and got through it. So I'm sure that it happens to everyone.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to feel that way. I think in some ways it's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So if we've got the butterflies, sometimes that sort of brings up our alertness and sometimes helps us in terms of a presentation. So it's not a bad thing to sort of be a little bit scared or have those sort of butterflies. That having been said, some folks will say, and the research varies, up to 80% of people are somewhat afraid or have the butterflies when public speaking. Again, that makes sense, and sort of embrace that fact that it can be disconcerting. But we'll go through some tips, some tricks, suggestions on increasing your credibility as a speaker to sort of alleviate that situation and eventually get us to a point where we not only feel good at public speaking, but we excel. That having been said, let's launch our first poll. So you folks in attendance, we're going to ask you to participate here. So the first question, and we do want you to answer, the folks that are out there. So what's the most precious commodity in today's world? So the first is data, attention. Third is cryptocurrency. And the last choice is gold. So I can see some people are answering.
Mm-hmm.
Let's give you guys a little bit longer because it doesn't seem. All right, there you go. We can tell out there that you're participating.
Smart crew too, huh?
Yeah, right. Totally. Nice. Okay, couple folks.
All right.
That sounds good. So let's see. It looks as if, definitely a smart crew out there. A few folks chose cryptocurrency, but let's take a look. Well, okay, sorry about that. So with the first poll, we do know that the answer is B. So the majority of you folks did choose that, and that's attention. So if we look at the first choice, that was data, that might be a popular answer as well as cryptocurrency. But without attention, people aren't going to certainly pay attention to some of the others. So let's look at public speaking do's and don'ts and whether or not we're working toward maintaining attention. So the first set we'll look at on the left, some don'ts in terms of maintaining attendance. We don't want to be boring. So somebody might start off a presentation. We can see here, good afternoon, my name is Byron Van Boring Lane, blah, blah, blah. I kind of did that too. My name is Adam Mayer. I'm the director.
So did I.
Yeah. So that's our first mistake, but we learn from these things. So you do want to engage your audience right off the bat, and just stating the obvious or what is traditional, similar to just saying our names and our titles may not be the best way to capture them right off the bat. So in some ways that's a don't. So going forward, maintaining attention, one thing we don't want to do as well is signal the end of your speech. I've been through, speaking myself as well as listening to others. Some folks will say, oh, it looks like we've run out of time. At that point, what do you do as an audience? Stacy, what might you do if you were listening to somebody?
You would tune out immediately because now you know it's over.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a speaker not long ago continually look at their watch, or look at their phone for the clock. And, that's an easy way to lose the audience. So don't signal the end of the speech. Keep them engaged right up until the end, and then certainly, let them go. With maintaining attendance, things we want to do on the right-hand side, you want to tell a story. You want to take a poll. We did that not long ago. Ask a provocative question. That's a great way to sort of get their attention at some point during the presentation. We'll look at that. Show a video clip. We're increasingly seeing these sort of things out there. And, sometimes the less text, the better. That can be something to look at. Images, those sort of things in your presentation, we'll look more at that. And then the last thing, at least on this slide, in terms of maintaining attention, one of the things we want to do in psychology, what they talk about is primacy and recency effects. So that's taking advantage of the first and the last moment. So in terms of your takeaways that you want your audience to have, think about what they are and outline those oftentimes in the beginning. And then ending with those points as well can be a good way to wrap up in two ways. So by beginning and ending with those points, hopefully they drive home. So we'll move forward with maintaining attention. A few more don'ts. Don't leave out transitions between content and slides. So with that, we talked about our first poll was related to attention. So that was answer B. And how do we sort of relate attention to the next slide? Well, we addressed it by looking at do's and don'ts. So having the transition be fairly seamless, have them be being related to one another is critical to keeping your audience. Another thing we don't want to do is hedge. I remember this in some of my psychology classes, using phrases like I think maybe, right, Stacy?
Yeah, that hurts your credibility big time.
Right. So I think maybe, or I guess, these are phrases that deny power. So it sounds like we're not confident, and that's something that's certainly not helpful as a public speaker. Or even, relate this to the job interview. Right? If an employer might ask you, tell me about a leadership situation. Well, I think one of the situations could have been, right? It just doesn't hold the weight that we need it to. And here too, sometimes people will use these phrases and use them as questions. I guess one of the situations was, it ends with a question when it should end with a period. So not only the words, but actually the phrasing and the tone. Another don't is, this is pretty straightforward. We know not to memorize. This increases our chances of derailment. And I think about, a number of different areas where it might be appealing, but try not to have your talking points and, sometimes go off the page. It can be interesting.
Yeah, and I can't stress that enough. That's something that I teach my students constantly because they think that if they just memorize their speech, it'll be an easy A because they got all the words correct. But to your point about the derailment, it just changes their nonverbals, it changes your tone, and then it's so much more obvious to the audience when you do have a hiccup when you've memorized, and you don't want to sound like a robot. So it's really important not to just memorize it from start to finish.
Absolutely. This too goes along with job interviewing. I know we've all either interviewed somebody or have been aware of somebody who's memorized their answers and
Hmm.
gone over it, right?
Right.
It's just not, it's not genuine.
Yeah, there's a difference between practicing and memorizing.
Absolutely. So a few more do's that we want to do in terms of maintaining attention. When transitioning, use words beyond next or so. They're easy, and if anything, this is something I need to work on as a public speaker, not just relying on those simple sort of phrases, but drawing more weighty content between the transitions rather than just words. So using analogies or idioms, those sort of things can be helpful. Do use artificial intelligence apps like Orai, ORAI, and ELSA Speak, ELSA Speak, to increase public speaking confidence and ability. These are pretty cool. I did look at the first one, ORAI. This is, again, artificial intelligence, and it's a free app. It's in the App Store. It's rated E for everyone. No biggie there. It provides on-demand speech feedback and lessons on communication coaching. So just like anything else, it gauges our ability and then lets us know things that we can work on. The second there, Elsa Speak, is a little bit different, but again, AI stuff. This helps us learn English pronunciation, conversation clues, as well as idioms. So that one was pretty popular as well. Again, both are in the App Store, and could be something to check out as a tool to increase your ability to maintain attention and increase confidence in speaking. And the final do in terms of maintaining attention, determine an outline. Whether you want to go traditional, it's a bulleted outline, lettered, numbered. If you want to do something question-based, which is always pretty cool because that gets your audience involved. Something that's illustrated or picture-based. I've seen a lot of folks use memes. They'll use GIFs. Um, yeah, cartoons as part of the
Mhm.
slide in between. Yeah, something to
Mhm.
sort of get our attention. You were going to say something,
And I
Stacy.
think that's important. We'll talk a little bit about knowing your audience, but I think using things like that are so crucial based on who your audience is. So I use memes all the time in my lectures as a college professor because I just know that if the students are maybe a little zoned out or I'm just spending too much time talking, having those sorts of visuals are really impactful.
Yeah, and it's cool because it's not the traditional thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good way. Okay, so let's take a look. This is a technique to sort of give yourself an outline. So to end with the last do, we'll look at how to um, sort of share what it is that you're saying. So tell, show, ask, and share is a nice little catalyst for how to present information. So some sources out there suggest that our audience, their attention span is somewhere between 8 to 10 minutes, which, Stacy, I think we talked a bit yesterday. That seems a little bit long, maybe?
Yeah, I would imagine it's shorter now with technology and everyone has their phone in their hand all the time, but I'm hopeful that it's at least 8 to 10 minutes for the.
Yeah, it does seem like quite a while. We'll see. But so if you do follow this sort of format, as speakers, we do need to do something new or different depending upon the time frame every few minutes to re-engage and wake up the audience. So if we work on this sort of 10-minute cycle and we pare it down and do, say, 2, 4, 6, 8, so we spend 2 minutes on telling them something, 2 minutes on showing them something, 2 minutes asking, 2 minutes sharing. It's a really sort of regimented routine. I
Mhm.
think it's something, if somebody were to do it in time, it would become much easier, and it doesn't have to be so regimented and time conscious. But let's take a look at an actual example of tell, show, ask, share. So I might be providing a presentation on resume writing. So I could tell the audience that the font type you choose on your resume is important. And with that, we might get in, and I'm not going to spend 2 minutes on it. I don't want anybody to, leave the room here, but something like Times New Roman is used so often, we may want to try something else to attract attention. You can go on and on about sort of little nitty-gritty things with that. But so first, again, you tell your audience about a topic. The next piece is we want to show what that's all about. So as the font type is important on your resume, we could show them these two different types. And if we look at the first, fonts that have serifs, this is Times New Roman. And these are like little hash marks, right? These little sort of tags in here. We can see it coming off the R underneath on the I and the F and so on. So some research had said that fonts with serifs are more easily read because these little serif pieces, these little hooks, act like barbs. And they sort of grab our eyes and drag us along the page. So if we think about actual textbooks, anything we read typically has a font that has serifs. So that might make them more easily read. But the other school of thought is what they call sans serif, so without serifs. And this is an example of Arial. So something there is Arial, Helvetica, a number of different things. And if we look too, if I just look at our presentation here, if I look at this website, that's sans serif. If I look at LinkedIn, that's sans serif. If I look at our main page, Montclair State University, that's sans serif. So anything that's really on the web is typically without a font, without a serif rather. So it depends. There's a number of ways to look at it, but a lot of resumes tend to be serif based, and a lot of stuff online, if we have a LinkedIn profile and so on, it'd be without. So we've told them about a font. We've shown them the different font types. We then ask, this is maybe a provocative question. I don't think it's that provocative, but if a font, yeah, it's kind of peculiar maybe. If a font is clothing for words, what would you look like dressed in Comic Sans? So hopefully we get some folks thinking out there. Just off the top of your head, Stacy, what do you think some of what some of them might look like dressed in Comic Sans?
I don't want to give it away, but maybe something jovial or silly or circus-like.
Yeah, I agree. It's personally the worst font in the world for me.
It is the worst font in the world.
Yeah, I can't deal with it, but we managed to work it in here. So tell, show, ask, and then we share. So in this case, you might look like Uncle Floyd, who was a real dude. I remember this guy when I was a little kid. He's a former Guinness Book of World Records holder for the longest time playing the piano. So if you want some random stuff, there's a little tidbit. But so long story short, again, maybe 2 minutes on each of the pieces within those four, and then move on to another topic, hopefully related to the original. You could span off of it. There's a number of ways to play it, but that's just one way to approach public speaking to maintain attention with your audience. So the top 10 attributes employers seek on resumes, going further with the resume thing. Continuing to develop your public speaking skills, whether novice or expert, is critical. Let's open up the second poll. Let's see, of the top 10 attributes employers seek on resumes, verbal communication ranks at what percentage? So we'll ask you out there to sort of chime in and give your answer. We'll give you a few seconds here.
I think while folks are voting, this is a good time for me to just mention that I share this with my students all the time too. So many of them think that they don't need public speaking in their career because, oh, I'm not going to be a politician or a teacher. Maybe I'm a web developer or something that's a little bit more introverted, so I don't need to speak publicly in my career. And I couldn't be further from the truth, because nowadays you have to speak publicly. The job interview is a public speaking exercise, right? So that's
Absolutely.
Even the beginning of the process. And then maybe you need to share your ideas or present in a boardroom. Basically every career now needs it. So I think this is really important that that hiring managers are looking for it.
Absolutely. And it looks like for the most part, everyone has answered. And it looks like the majority said over 80% employers look for verbal communication on the resume. One person had the right answer, and kudos to you. The answer is nearly 70% of them. Let's see. Yeah, nearly 70% of employers seek public speaking. So if you have it, you need to list it. And if we look at the nitty gritty here, long story short, you can add public speaking to your profile or your summary at the top of the resume. You can include it in bullet points as you describe your experience. Those would probably be the two easiest and most simple ways to get to that info. A little bit more with what employers seek on resumes in terms of public speaking. Effective public speakers are viewed as leaders, and that's the top attribute employers seek on resumes, and that's up to about 80%. So again, you've got leadership experience, add that to your summary at the top, that big paragraph sort of thing, and add that to your bullet points so that an employer is aware of how this all goes.
And I think if I can just add in, if you don't feel like it's a strong suit, it's something that you can say that you're looking to develop throughout your career, especially if we know it's so important to employers. If you don't feel like the most competent public speaker, which not everybody is, it's important to say that it's something that you're working on and hope to continue as part of your professional development plan.
Absolutely. Okay, so now I'll hand it over to Stacy.
Great. Thank you, Adam. So I want to talk a little bit about credibility in terms of public speaking and why it's so important for your career. So credibility, as we know, is defined as judgments made by a perceiver. And this starts before you've even spoken a word to your audience at the job interview. It starts with people's first impressions of you. It's a persuasive speaking strategy. We can think back to ethos, pathos, logos that we've all learned that can help you win over an audience before you even start to speak. So I'm going to just cover quickly 3 types of credibility. The first is initial, and this, as I said, is before someone even begins his or her speech. This is mostly based on your reputation, the credentials of the speaker. Are they known to the audience? Initial credibility is the first credibility a speaker has with an audience, and it comes from, do you appear to be nervous, prepared? How are you dressed? Are you looking professional, presenting yourself well? So this is just how much they know about you before you even begin. Then we have derived credibility, and this is the credibility that an individual develops while delivering the speech. So this becomes an ongoing process. This comes from the quality of the speech, the professionalism of the speaker. For speakers that have no initial credibility, so maybe the audience doesn't know who you are before you begin your speech, this derived credibility is very important. Not only do you experience the concept of derived credibility in public speaking, but as I said, also in the case of job interviews, where maybe your only initial credibility would have been your resume or your contact or how you got the interview in the first place. And then there's terminal credibility. Terminal isn't always the nicest word, but this doesn't have a negative connotation. It's the credibility an individual has gained or lost after delivering a speech. So think of this as more of a lasting impression that the audience feels after they've walked away from your speech, or that your employer might feel after you've had the job interview. This is different from derived because it has just a longer lasting effect. So I thought we could do our next poll now. Just to see your thoughts on what do you think makes a speaker credible? Is it appearance, education, experience, or perhaps a combination or all of the above? So I'll give folks a few seconds to vote on that.
It looks like most of you guys are voting out there.
Yeah, and you would be correct. This was an easy one. It's like taking a test, right? We always go with D, all of the above. But it's true, as I said, between the initial, derived, and terminal credibility, it's really important that you appear professionally, that you are educated and knowledgeable in the subject, you have the experience. So, great. So a little bit about communication competence. This helps to establish your credibility as a speaker. So this refers to the audience's perception of how much do you know about this topic, right? Does the speaker know what they're talking about? Would you trust an environmental lawyer to deliver a lecture on technology? Would you trust a mechanic to deliver a speech on brain surgery, right? You need to know that there's some established credibility there.
Sure. Wow.
Right? Think about it. And
yeah.
We've all been to lectures maybe where we're like, does this person really know what they're talking about? Or,
Mm.
and you don't know their background maybe. So it's important to know that as part of communication competence. Then there's trustworthiness, and this is important. So this refers to how truthful or honest we perceive the speaker to be. This is all based on perception. So can I believe what they're saying? And the way we develop trustworthiness is relatability. So can I relate to them? Do I like them? Would I trust them? And there's dynamism, which refers to the enthusiasm, energy, or forcefulness exhibited by the speaker. So you want to balance emotion and energy with also being lackluster, which Adam spoke about earlier. You don't want to just be boring and monotone, but you don't want to have too much emotion or energy. You need to know when it's appropriate and how to balance that. So I like to think about the example of political pundits on cable news shows, for example. Sometimes they can be calm, and sometimes you see people blowing up at one another. So what's appropriate there? And then that brings us to composure. So that's appearing emotionally stable, confident, and in control and in check of your emotions and the presentation. So appropriateness of composure is situational, right? Is it appropriate to laugh or cry? I would say not appropriate to cry during a job interview. It could be appropriate to laugh, though, if you're having a really good and casual, comfortable conversation. And when you're delivering a speech, if it's an emotional topic, it might be appropriate to tear up a little bit. So it's all about knowing the appropriateness and keeping your composure as needed. So knowing your audience, this is key regardless of whether we're talking a job interview or you're presenting your ideas in front of a boardroom or thousands of people. So anytime you're doing a speech or preparing interview responses to questions rather, you should be prepared with your audience always in mind. And we've done some polls throughout. This is a great way to do that, to get to know your audience a little bit. So it's important to know something about them. You can ascertain the attitudes, beliefs, and values of your audience. This is not always a possibility. If you're speaking in front of thousands of people, you have to sort of make educated guesses, but when you can, it's important to survey them based on their demographics. We talk a little bit about attitudes, beliefs, and values, right? So knowing people's core beliefs is important, especially if the topic that you're speaking on is a touchy subject. So some of the demographics that we look at when we want to get to know our audience are age, gender, ethnicity, culture, and group affiliations. But you never want to make assumptions. That's a huge foot in your mouth moment. Again, from speaking from in front of thousands of people, speaking in a boardroom of 25 people, or on a job interview one-on-one. You never want to make assumptions. So do your best to get to know the people that you're talking to as best as you can.
Absolutely.
Then we have building and establishing credibility. Again, this is a process that develops over the entire course of the speech. From the minute you sit down in front of that employer or the minute you step on a stage, you should establish credibility in the introduction of your speech, but it doesn't end there. You might need to reference your credibility as a speaker, or why you're credible and why you're fit for this job in this circumstance throughout the process of the interview or the speech. Again, this comes from personal experience, relevant and reputable sources, trustworthiness, nonverbals. We talked a little bit about that. So important. You know, Adam referenced a speaker who was checking his watch and his phone. That's just one of the many no-nos in terms of nonverbals. Eye contact, I think, is important. Keep your speech or presentation organized. Adam spoke about that as well. And then practice and prepare. Adam, any thoughts on some of that, especially in terms of the interview process?
Oh, absolutely. I think with the interview itself, I mean, following some of the do's and don'ts that we've discussed, but here too, making the interview a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that flies in the face of the whole memorization thing. So we do want to answer an employer's question for sure. And that seems obvious. Some folks don't answer the actual questions. So that's
Sure.
why, yeah, I have to say that. But other than that, put your answers out there in the job interview, and then let the employer probe. Let them
Mm-hmm.
follow up, him or her, with, question. Oh, could you tell me a little bit more about how you did the fundraising portion of that
Right.
project? Yeah, and then it's organic. People are going back and forth, and I think it's critical to have that sort of conversation vibe.
That's a great point. You don't necessarily need to establish your credibility in one big sentence
Yeah.
saying, I'm a professional and I'm credible because this, right? It should definitely happen organically. I think that's a great point. So my final advice, and this is something
Woo!
that I tell my students too, is when all else fails, exude confidence. I know that maybe on your next job interview or the next time you're delivering any sort of speech or presentation, hopefully what Adam and I have shared with you so far will stick in your brain, but I know that sometimes when you're in the moment, you think everything I've learned is out the window right now. But if you remember one thing, it's be confident. And if you present yourself professionally, you're halfway there.
Absolutely. Okay, so this webinar is it's been recorded, and at some point in the soon future, through our Career Services Archive, that's our YouTube channel, under MSU Career Workshops, you'll be able to review that along with a number of other videos. We have how to ace the phone and video interview, job interviews, making most of career services, and so on. A number of resources that are free and available to you guys at any time, as well as Stacy's neck of the woods.
Yes, so we also archive some of our webinars, and not just the ones that we partner with Career Services, but some other ones that we posted with other campus partners. And for alumni, they are available on Montclair Connect.
Okay, so if you do have questions, by all means, feel free to type them in the questions pane. And while that's going on, I do want to thank everyone for attending public speaking in your career today. It was great to work with Stacy. I'm glad we were able to connect on this project.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Sure. I think in terms of the attendees, once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on this presentation. Please provide your feedback, and as this will help us improve our services. I don't see any questions at this point, and that's cool, because maybe you guys, maybe we did our job. Who knows?
You did such a great job. There's no question.
So thank you again for joining us today. Be sure to take advantage of career services, connect with alumni engagement, and have a great rest of the week. Oh, we do have a question.
Great.
Okay, cool. Oh, y'all were great. Hey, thanks very much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Okay.
You boosted our confidence in our public speaking, so we appreciate that.
Thanks, Adrienne.
And if there are any other questions, as I said, you can always feel free to contact the alumni office, and I can speak further to that. So.
All right.